各位觀眾，大家好，歡迎收睇26分鐘見證實錄。本國今年嘅新冠疫情逐漸平穩，各行各業大致重回正軌，人才需求亦都相對有所增加。但係根據本國統計局嘅數據就顯示職位空缺與失業率比例創下歷史嘅新低，勞動力市場緊張已經成為咗聯邦政府施政嘅其中一項難題。為咗解決問題聯邦政府早前就宣布喺今年嘅11月15號開始實施取消對持有學生簽證嘅全職國際學生每星期20小時工作時數限制嘅臨時政策。新修訂嘅條例意味住國際學生可以喺讀書期間、假期甚至係學期休息期都可以自由工作。呢一項臨時嘅政策對現時喺本國嘅國際學生有啲乜嘢影響呢？學生又點樣填補本國所需嘅職位空缺呢？
This change is going to help sustain Canada's post-pandemic growth and provide a boost to thousands of employers looking to add to their staff for the upcoming holiday season, particularly in sectors that are facing the most severe labour shortages.
呢一項臨時政策是利是弊，社會上存在不同嘅爭議。
You know, there are a lot of unscrupulous people in the world. And as I said, you have this vulnerable population that can be taken advantage of. So it concerns me. It really does.
用翻個學生嘅立場嗰方面嚟睇法，而俾翻呢個決定就俾個學生佢做呢個決定，唔係話你自己另外一個人嚟話我覺得你應該係咁樣做。
嚟自中國瀋陽嘅李洪坤 Sam 喺2年前，因為當時正喺瀋陽就讀嘅大學同卑詩大學有一項交流銜接計劃，喺大學生涯第3以及第4年嚟到卑詩省修讀物料工程學系。對於聯邦政府豁免國際全職學生每星期工作時數限制嘅臨時政策，佢亦都略知一二。但由於自己學業比較繁重，因此暫時未有打算為自己尋找工作。但佢表示呢一項政策對學生嚟講係一個好政策，但對於解決本國勞動力短缺問題作用就唔係好大。
我是沒有在這塊做過那個兼職工作什麼的，因為主要是我交換就時間比較短，然後我的課程還比較多，所以說我沒有就是太多的時間去做這個兼職工作。就是我覺得就是如果是這個就是他的工作時間沒有限制的話，我覺得就是我想應該是對就是所有國際學生應該是有好處的吧。就是對於那些想勤工儉學的學生來說，他們可以就是獲得更多的報酬，然後就在他們能兼顧學業和工作的情況下，他們可以收穫更多。我覺得在校學生的話，我覺得他做兼職，他可能做不了什麼就是特別好的一些工作，可能就是在一些商店或者是快餐店打零工什麼的。就是反正我覺得是他其實對加拿大這個 labor shortage 可能就是沒有太大的一個幫助，就是可能只是在一些商店打零工什麼的，沒有什麼特別大的幫助，我是這麼想。
李洪坤透露佢身邊有一個朋友同佢一樣，一個學期要修讀6科，但由於朋友要幫補生活開支，因此每星期要出外做兼職10幾個鐘。但佢同時亦都擔心政策雖然對學生有利，但無止境咁工作亦都會令同輩無法適當地安排自己嘅時間。但佢同時亦都明白到現時本國正面臨高通脹底下，每個學生都需要為自己提供一個較好嘅生活環境，而聯邦政府嘅臨時政策正可以幫到佢哋。
真沒有跟他談論過這些東西，他也就是不太願意跟我們去說這個東西。我覺得他是覺得就是可能就是花自己父母太多錢，他覺得自己應該去那個多少彌補一下。我是覺得他是這種心理，所以說他也沒跟我談論特別多的這些東西。我是覺得就是學費的話就是太多了，我覺得就是光憑你自己打工就是掙的這些錢可能也補不上，這部分我覺得就是可能還是自己家庭會出。然後至於生活費的話，就平時吃飯就是這些花銷什麼的，我覺得就是如果可以通過工作 来补上，我觉得这个还是很好的。我现在就是天天自己在家里做饭，我觉得就是还是就是自己买着做的东西可能会便宜一些。然后现在就比如说去一趟餐馆吃顿饭，可能就是花20-30刀。然后如果自己做一顿的话，就是可能1星期或者2星期，可能光原材料可能也就是$300左右。平均这么一算下來的話，就是會便宜特別多。
聯邦移民部長菲沙喺10月宣布呢一個政策嘅時候表示，政策唔單止可以為本國50萬名國際全職學生解決生活所需，亦都可以為本國喺新冠疫情之後嘅經濟帶嚟曙光。
Look at people who are already here that don't have permission to work and make it easier for them to join the workforce. So we made a decision when we had 1 million empty jobs and 500,000 people in Canada that are international students who didn't have the ability to work full time, and made a decision to lift that cap. The second reason that we wanted to advance this policy is I've been hearing a lot of stories about international students who are here in Canada who don't have the means to properly support themselves, oftentimes because they've been given bad information by promoters on the other side of the world who told them that it would be very easy for them to come here, that they could work, that they'd be guaranteed permanent residency, when a lot of that wasn't actually the case. We want to make sure that we better equip international students to help take care of themselves and to support themselves while they're here. So this program design is going to both help students better support themselves and, as importantly, help students solve strategic gaps in the Canadian labor force at a time when we're dealing with a record labor shortage and a record low unemployment.
根據本國統計局數據顯示，職位空缺同失業率比例創下歷史新低，而政府亦都預計未來3個月，接近2/5嘅企業將會比較困難揾到合適嘅員工，其中以建築業、製造業以及住宿、食品等服務業嘅情況較為明顯。聯邦移民部長認為本國勞動力短缺情況已經轉趨嚴重，甚至難以喺短期內解決，但批准國際全職學生自由工作能夠為本國部分行業僱主減輕招聘人才嘅負擔。
So we don't expect that the challenges relating to a labor shortage will be solved exclusively by the change we've made to lift the cap on the number of hours international students can work. But there's no magic bullet. We need to make sure that we use every tool at our disposal to help get workers into jobs that are not going to only support the student or newcomer who's going to work in those jobs, but that will also support the jobs of Canadians who are working for businesses that don't have access to the labor that they need to make sure that the business survives. We're going to make sure that we leverage every tool in the toolbox, whether it's increasing the number of hours international students can work, speeding up the processing times for work permits, whether it's creating new programs that allow us to better target newcomers who are going to fill key gaps in the labor force. There's a number of different measures that we're pursuing, but we do think that the decision on lifting the cap on the hours international students can work will make a positive difference. We don't know with precision exactly how many students will choose to avail themselves of this new opportunity, but I do expect that many thousands of students will spend more time working to help Canadian businesses grow, and at the same time more effectively support themselves as they continue to carry on their studies here in Canada.
聯邦政府宣布呢一項臨時政策嘅有效日期只係去到明年12月31日，政策亦都只容許喺今年10月7日或之前獲得學生簽證嘅國際全職學生享有豁免。移民部長就此解釋確定呢一個日期嘅原意。
We wanted to time the eligibility to people who already had an application in the system at the time of the announcement, because our international student program has a really interesting feature in that we accept an unlimited number of applications currently. We did not want to create a situation where people who are coming to Canada for the purpose of working try to come here through the back door by applying for a study permit. If your primary purpose to come to Canada is to work, we want you to apply for a work permit. The study permit is designed for a different purpose. We know that everybody who applied before we made the announcement this fall, who applied for a study permit, had the primary purpose of coming to Canada was to study. So we wanted to open the program up for people who were already in the system without creating a new way for people to apply through the wrong program if they perceive that would give them a different pathway to come when we would rather them apply for a work permit.
佢亦都唔希望將政策一刀切。
We don't want to decide today whether we should end that program specifically on that date, but we want to give ourselves the flexibility to make that decision once we understand the impact that this policy decision has had. We're going to watch very closely the labor market dynamics. If there is still a labor shortage at the end of next year, maybe we'll make a decision to continue with the lift of the cap on hours and potentially expand it to new applications as well. But we want to watch what happens. We want to watch to make sure that students continue to work full-time. If they've come here as a full-time student, we want to figure out whether the number of hours that students are now permitted to work will actually have a positive impact on the labor force. And we want to make sure that we don't put students in a position where going forward forever,
移民部長亦都唔排除，如果政策實施1年多之後，反應非常積極，以及能夠解決本國勞動力市場不足嘅問題，當局可能考慮延長計劃。
We'll make that decision when we get closer to the end of next year. The advantage that we're going to have when we get closer to the expiry of the current policy is that we're going to have real-world data about how people behaved and the impact on the economy of having made this decision. When we have the opportunity to try something out for a little more than a year to understand the consequences of it, we'll be in a better position to determine whether it has been a success or whether we need to make policy tweaks closer to the end of next year. So I am not ruling out the possibility that we will extend this as a permanent change, but we're going to watch to make sure that this doesn't have a negative impact on a student's ability to complete their studies, that it continues to have a positive impact on the Canadian economy and the labor force, and to determine whether it has a positive impact on the ability of international students to support themselves. So the advantage of trying something out for a time-limited period to start is we're not going to have to guess about what the consequences will be when we make a decision to make it permanent or not. We're going to know on the basis of real-world data and the real human experiences of people who are living in Canada as international students.
唔少學生認為呢一項取消對國際學生每星期工作時數嘅限制嘅臨時政策，既可以幫補生活開支，又可以增值自己。而移民部長亦都解釋呢一項臨時政策嘅修訂原意。但係有唔少熟悉移民政策嘅人士對呢一個做法嘅可行性就表示質疑。佢哋嘅立場係點嘅呢？我哋下一節翻嚟再睇。歡迎翻嚟節目時間。呢一項取消對國際學生每星期工作時數限制嘅臨時政策出台之後有部分熟悉移民政策嘅人士就提出質疑，擔心有人利用該政策帶嚟嘅方便而走法律灰色地帶，甚至認為呢一項政策同學生簽證嘅原意背道而馳。
對於取消國際學生每星期工作時數限制嘅臨時政策，有熟悉移民法嘅律師認為政策長遠嚟講弊多於利。佢認為學生應該專注學業，畢業之後當局已經有相關移民通道俾學生工作。
I have real concerns on this policy. I mean, realistically speaking, I appreciate the fact that there's huge inflation. I appreciate the fact that living in Canada is difficult and with prices going up and people are trying to pay for their school and things of the sort. But you have a vulnerable population here, right, of young people who are going to school, and as they become somewhat concerned with finances and as they are asked by employers saying, listen, can you work a few more hours? Can you work a few more hours? Can you work a few more hours? All of a sudden, the purpose why they came here, the purpose of them being here goes away because they won't have time necessarily to complete their studies or do what they need to do. And that will affect their life because in order to, for instance, get a postgraduate work permit to stay in Canada, you have to go to school full time up until your last semester, then you don't. But if you don't go to school full time, it can then jeopardize getting the postgraduate work permit so that you can get the work experience full time in your field and possibly staying in Canada. And it also, to my mind, it's there are a lot of unscrupulous people in the world. And as I said, you have this vulnerable population that can be taken advantage of. So it concerns me. It really does.
David 加上同時亦都指出，該政策會令學生無法順利畢業。佢手頭上曾經處理過有唔少學生因為顧住工作而無法順利畢業。佢擔心如果政策允許學生無止境工作，長遠嚟睇將會造成不可挽回嘅地步。
Let's put it this way. If they start seeing that there'll be many students who do not qualified for the postgraduate work permit or who have overworked in the sense that what they've done is that they have put in too many hours, have not been able to keep up a full-time schedule or full course load, then I think that they're going to have to pull this back. Because I think in a year from now, or a couple of years from now, you may start seeing individuals going to IRCC and saying, listen, I wasn't able to go to school full time because I put in too many work hours. And IRCC then says, well, then you can't get a postgraduate work permit. And I think if that happens or happens more frequently, then I don't think this will be a permanent solution.
對於政策嘅推行，聯邦新民主黨移民政策評論員關惠貞認為，現時本國物價指數昂貴，海外學生學費亦都比本地學生需要繳交較多嘅費用，因此有利於海外學生維持生計。佢甚至認為呢一個政策應該持續落去，工作幾多個鐘應該由學生自己作主。
係咁樣，其實咧加拿大咧就係非常需要唔同嘅工作人員啦。咁當然啲學生嚟到加拿大咧，就係其實可以有好多唔同嘅貢獻嘅，包括在內佢哋自己嘅學校嗰方面嘅上進之外咧，其實咧佢哋亦都係可以喺工作嗰方面咧為加拿大有一個好大嘅貢獻。咁樣所以咧，其實一直以嚟咧，新民主黨我哋都覺得咧，其實政府咧應該容許啲學生做工，任佢中意做幾多個鐘，唔係話限住佢，只係俾佢20個鐘嚟做咯。咁所以佢今次改咗呢一個 policy 咧，咁樣我哋係支持嘅。但係出咗問題呢個 policy 咧，對我嚟講咧，就係佢只係就係話今年佢係會咁樣做，就係俾1年嘅啫。咁樣其實咧應該係長期，應該係有呢個改善咯。另外，其實如果大家用呢一個學生嘅角度嗰方面嚟睇整個問題咧，其實咧重要嘅問題就應該問政府就係，其實你咁樣做呢一個改呢一個 policy 咧，係咪真係為咗學生嚟做啊？定係為咗商業為咗個 industry 嚟做嘅？咁樣所以其實咧，我亦都覺得咧，其實應該政府咧就唔單止淨係為咗商業為咗我哋嘅 economy 我哋嘅經濟嗰方面嚟睇法，亦都要諗翻學生嗰方面嚟睇法咯。咁樣其實有好多學生嘅貢獻嚟到加拿大咧，佢哋海外嘅學生嚟到加拿大，俾嗰啲學費咧又係非常之貴嘅，即係所以佢哋其實咧都有好多唔同嘅困難。咁一直以嚟我亦都覺得其實加拿大可以接受到佢嚟到加拿大呢度讀書，其實我哋亦都應該咧係踴躍咁樣嚟支持佢哋，等佢可以永久咁樣係留低喺加拿大度，咁樣就係應該係俾嗰個permanent residence 嘅status 俾佢哋咯。
有外界唔少聲音認為，當前本國勞工短缺問題嚴重，包括醫療系統面臨崩潰，以及建築行業職位減少等。但呢一啲工作都需要相對嘅資歷認可，質疑當局放寬國際學生每星期工作時數係咪能夠解決問題。關惠貞表示，現時本國不論咩行業都缺人，學生能夠彌補旅遊、酒店業嘅發展。
其實咧，佢講話幫加拿大嘅經濟咧，最主要咧就係其實短期咁樣嚟幫到嘅啫，而係嗰啲工作咧，我諗一般嚟講咧就唔會係喺翻嗰啲學生佢哋讀嗰個範圍嗰度嘅。好多時咧，其實咧，我諗政府或者諗住話係我哋需要個 tourism industry 要需要多啲人出嚟喺啲餐館餐廳嗰度做嘢做 waiter 做 waitress 或者即係喺個 hotel industry 做嗰啲咁樣嘅唔同嘅雜工咯。因為講真啦，因為佢哋已經係個 full time student 啦，咁樣所以其實佢哋出嚟做工嘅時間其實都唔係多嘅，有咁多唔同呢啲嘅限制咧，就其實對個學生嘅將來嗰方面嚟睇法咧，未必一定係可以幫到佢。除咗就係講話佢哋係可以揾到份工，可以賺少少錢嚟津貼翻佢哋嘅嘅教育嘅需要。
關惠貞一直強調，政府應該將政策進一步放寬，俾學生可以決定自己嘅發展，亦都能夠喺本國現時高通脹底下有一個較好嘅生活質素。 但移民律師 David Garson 就唔同意呢一個觀點。佢認為國際學生嚟到加拿大之前，理應向政府展示佢哋擁有足夠嘅資金證明應對生活。
I worked, as a clerk in a motel when I went to school to pay for myself. I mean, that's what students do. So I think that's what the program is for. Now, we also have huge inflation, so you have a situation where the government can also say, yeah, and because we're having this big inflation and everything is so expensive, housing and food, that this gives a student a chance to make more money so that they can support themselves. But when a student comes to Canada, as you probably know, they're supposed to show they have enough money to support themselves. And also, it could create a temptation on behalf of the student to say, hey, this is great. I can work and work and work and work and work. So I don't know that this is a long-term solution to the problem that we have, because I think, as I said, it could be to the detriment of an individual who may not be thinking about this as fulsomely as they should.
呢一次聯邦政府推行嘅豁免國際全職學生工作時數限制嘅政策並冇設時數上限。聯邦保守黨移民政策評論員 Tom Kimmig 雖然贊成相關政策，但佢認為應該設置工作時數上限，但政府一直冇一個周全嘅計劃實施。
Sure, it can, but that it comes down to if you set the hours at 30, you have to then enforce it. So how are you going to enforce it? That requires more people, more money, more time, more effort. Is there a difference between 30 or 40 hours? And is there any data or evidence to support it? The government hasn't provided any data or evidence to me. And at the end of the day, it's about choice and flexibility. And I trust international students to make the best decision for themselves and their personal situation. And I don't think the government has any special knowledge or any data to tell you, as an international student, let's say, that 30 hours is better than 32 hours, or 30 is better than 20, or 20 is better than 40. And they get treated basically the way a citizen of Canada gets treated. You want to work? You can work with the understanding that you're still doing your studies. And that's the condition of you being in Canada, is that you're succeeding at your international studies.
Tom Kimmig 亦都認為聯邦政府應該設定一個機制去監管唔會有學生因為過分工作而耽誤學業。佢亦都提到有呢一個政策原因同埋責任歸咎聯邦政府冇處理好所有簽證嘅申請，以致本國移民申請滯後，令人才流失。
The government, when they did the extension to 40 hours, they should have had a fraud system in place to make sure that people can't do exactly what you just said. Because if you come to Canada claiming to be an international student, but then you wind up working like a 60-hour week and not doing your studies, one is, I would hope you would fail out of whatever program you are in, because obviously you're not focused on studying and in the program. And yeah, it's up to the government to have a fraud system in place. And I would hope that they have it there already. Based on my experience with other programs and other streams, the government has a 2.4 million backlog of applications, and they're right now focused on trying to clear the backlog, and they've been failing at it so far. So I don't hold much hope that they'll have an anti-fraud measure in place to stop it.
移民律師 David Garson 擔心國際學生為咗政策帶嚟嘅便利而不停工作，以致荒廢學業，同移民部批出嘅學生簽證原意背道而馳，甚至認為學生年紀尚輕，未能為自己真正做一個好嘅決定。
I think they would have to do a study in that regard. I don't know. I know the reasoning behind this is ostensibly to create employment in areas that need people to work. And again, ostensibly to assist a student who may need financial help. But I don't know what kind of studies they did or what kind of research they did with regard to how many students are having issues financially, or if they would be helpful with regard to small businesses in that sense. I think the problem is that they probably should have done more research into this to determine, first of all, how many students, what is the percentage of students that aren't completing their studies? Secondly, if they do, if a student is, how likely is it that a student who works a million hours a week will be to complete their studies? I mean, I think again, I'll say it to you, if I was 21 or 22 years old and you gave me carte blanche, you gave me, here, just go ahead and do it, and I'm on my own for the first time in a country that I'm not from, I may not be making the best decisions.
好啦，今集嘅節目時間又差唔多啦。咁如果觀眾對我哋嘅節目有啲乜嘢意見嘅話，係好歡迎大家以電郵嘅方式同我哋聯絡㗎。咁如果觀眾想上網重溫翻今集嘅節目，亦都可以上到去我哋嘅網站點擊節目重溫一欄。喺下個星期嘅節目同樣時間，我哋會播出2022加國大事回顧，26分鐘見證實錄將會暫停一次，敬請留意。喺呢一度祝大家聖誕快樂，新年進步。